Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 Podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. Every Monday morning, we give you 3 short stories, 1 big story, and wins and losses. I'm with my co-host, Ann Zeta. How goes it this week? We had an interview.
We did this week. So
It was.
that'll be the big story.
Yes.
But there's also tons of stories. Like I was going through, and we kind of focused on 2 topics that we thought we would make or 2 or 3 topics that we thought we would make our short stories. But I have over here in my notes asides and a whole bunch of other things that I thought were newsworthy. And we're not going to definitely be able to touch on every single one of those, but we'll do our best. And hopefully what we settled on is of interest to the audience.
And so January 14th is the beginning of, I guess, application signing day. What's the official term for
filing period?
Filing period for anyone who's interested in running for local office in Fort Worth. And so that's why our main interview is with Tara Maldonado, who is someone who's been on the pod several times, but we have a great conversation with her and get to share her experience, and we get to talk about what it really feels like if you're considering as a progressive person to run for office. But before we get there, we got a lot of things that hit the news, and a lot of it is somewhat unfortunate. So the first one is, earlier this week, photographs by artist Sally Mann were removed from the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth's exhibition, Diaries of Home, following a police report filed against the museum after a local Dallas publication first brought public attention to the works, which depicts the artist's nude children. And at the time of the removal, the museum did not respond to inquiries from this publication. But what we do have is we have a letter. We also have a letter from other people who are saying against it. Tim O'Hare was someone who's also saying that these man's photography was inappropriate. These were photos of titles of articles called Popsicle Drips, The Perfect Tomato, The Wet Bed, and Another Cracker. These showed pictures of the artist's children nude and private parts. And so this Dallas magazine that we feel like we've talked about relatively often, because they also were the ones who talked about Kay Granger and went to Kay Granger's office. They're also ones who exposed Chris Nettles with the leak interview. And so they seem to always looking for something that honestly keeps showing up into our pod, which I actually kind of feel a little disappointed about. But obviously they're looking to pick fires, but mainly for conservative views. So, and give us more that maybe talk about it from a lens of people who may have no idea what's going on and what you see here.
Yeah, that was a lot that you just said. And we have some specific articles that'll be in the show notes, 2 of which are by Glass Tire and are really excellent rundowns of exactly what happened. They do point out that the publication in Dallas, which I'm not encouraging people to read, so I'm just leaving the name out. But it was a publication that was formerly owned by a Black progressive. It was formerly a Black progressive newspaper, and now has been bought by some former Tea Party political movement folks that are definitely not Black or progressive. And so they brought this to the attention. And then Glass Tire did 2 articles, one on January 7th and a follow-up article
January 10th.
On January 10th, that kind of cleared up more and got a actual response from the Modern Museum of Art. You know, I've seen this exhibit, although when we went to see it, it was after the photographs that some found objectionable had been removed. So I did not see in person in the museum those photographs, but I have gone online to look them up and see them for myself. And I know that Sally Mann faced some controversy when this exhibit was first displayed in some other museums across the country. And so in my mind, this issue has been adjudicated and is not the, hair on fire freak out that some folks seem to be trying to make it. In looking at photographs that Sally Mann has taken and shared through her artistic endeavors, these are not pornography in my mind. And these articles actually do reach out to folks who are experts in that area who say that there's criteria by which something can be deemed to be pornographic and therefore, not allowed. And it doesn't meet, these photographs don't meet that criteria. And this has already been thoroughly discussed previously. So it's concerning to me that I think this, along with the reference that the Amon Carter Museum had an exhibit where some of these same folks who are raising objection raised objection. And I think it is just a concerning situation that people are, deeming art to not be art and making this like a political thing. So it's, more conservative Republicans saying that this art should not be displayed, and that this is, as the article, the Glass Tire article points out, that this is the most recent in a series of Republican-led complaints and actions taken against art institutions and artwork on display in Texas. So it's not just happening here in Fort Worth. This article goes on to describe some other places where city councils and folks have cut art funding. And so this is where I find great concern as someone who has been a big supporter of the arts in Fort Worth and have pushed for more funding for the arts and, put in time and energy to discuss the future of the Community Arts Center. I don't want to be this is a full-fledged attack on the arts and that it's going to, damage our cultural district. But I don't think that we should just sit back and think that this is not a concern about making sure that our cultural district is allowed to continue to, show art to the point where it is the place that people go to see, all kinds of art. The Modern Museum of Art has been one of my favorites, and I found a photograph that I just shared with you earlier of my child, who is now 27 years old, on a sculpture out in front of the former building that was the Modern Museum of Art, which is the Community Arts Center. And so the Modern has always been one of my favorites. Do I like every piece of art that is displayed in that place? Sometimes it's crazy. That's what modern art is. It's expressions that are different and unique, and not everyone thinks that every piece of art that they see is to their taste. And I think that that's kind of where this lands.
Yeah, and what we're looking at is Tim O'Hare said on X, the images of children reported in the media at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth are deeply disturbing. Sexual exploitation of a minor, including under the guise of art, should never be tolerated. I have full confidence in the law enforcement to thoroughly investigate this matter and take appropriate action. I will always be committed to protecting the most vulnerable members of our society, our children. What's crazy is like Tim O'Hare is more worked up about photos of a mom and her children than he is more worked up in the Tarrant County pastors who have been proven to have assaulted or had sexual conduct with minors. And so if you're worried about normal folks looking at art, you should be more worried about your interesting weird adults watching younger children. Like if you're so worried about this photo, you should be worried about any type of adult interaction at any church that is under your leadership. There's a great opinion article by Bradford William Davis in the Star Telegram, Don't Let Critics Censor Fort Worth Photo Exhibit Because They See Inequity, Not Art. That he just really kind of talks about the difference. And you also, he in the article talks about how Mercy Culture church pastor Heather Scott, fresh off, trying to get their transformation exploitation center called the Justice Residency, they were talking about getting staff and pushing staff to challenge and get the work removed as well. So it's just, to me, it's like annoying. Like, if what happens if the Modern Art Museum was a church, and what happened to the freedom to do kind of what you wanted to do, and now it's like, but we're going to police the church, the museum much differently than you did a church that is actually trying to bring in, sex victims and allow those people to be exploited and preyed on. Yet this is just a mother who has her children taking photos. And yes, do I understand the impact of some of these photos and what these photos can make you discomfort? I don't know what's the difference between, European Impressionism when you see painted of naked kids with their parents, or even, a white artist from way back in the day, a white male artist who's like an uncle or a neighbor doing this painting. There's constant times I remember saying to my wife, like, this is kind of just weird. But again, that's the point of art, is to
Make you think.
make you think, to make you to see how you look at the world. And to me, why this is more concerning, the thing that I'm seeing constant, and this is what I see in the national news as well, right? When you see Mark Zuckerberg say, I'm taking away fact checking and I'm going to do something similar to Elon Musk and I'm going to support our president. This is to me what the modern's doing when Tim O'Hare gets involved and when people get involved, is the bullying is coming to a point where we're not stepping up and saying no. And that to me is the part where you start realizing that you live not as democratically as you thought you did. And now they're deciding what gets to stay available to you and what you get to see in museums. And that to me is the concerning part. Regardless of how I feel about the art or whose art it is, it's that I imagine the modern has to stay pretty politically correct, has to stay very gentle. And that to me is probably the part where it's like we don't stand up to bullies. And I think that's the part that's the biggest loss for me.
Yeah, and to your point about the opinion piece by Bradford Davis, I think he did an excellent job of kind of pointing out the concerns that I have and how this is being looked at. I think that Modern has been hearing maybe from folks that are supportive of the removal and, supportive of this, which basically is kind of censorship and a curtailing of free speech, which the experts have spoken in the Glass Tire article, saying that this falls into the category of protected speech. And so I think both of those Glass Tire articles and this opinion piece in the Star Telegram have covered this topic pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and move to the second conversation, the second story for today. And that second story is going to be Keller School Board now plans to keep a public out of a meeting to discuss a proposed split. So there's been many reports in the last few days about Keller ISD. Basically, there were some Keller residents, and I guess you can even parents and potential, I guess, people connected to the council in some capacity who started sharing on social media a tip that Keller ISD is looking to possibly split their district. They're the fourth largest district in Tarrant, have over 40 schools, and they cross several different cities in Tarrant County. And so there's this discussion about separating them between, I guess, the highway of 377. And so there's over 34,000 students. And so obviously this is a concern because everyone feels blindsided. It has led to council member Charles Lauersdorf to get involved and share his concerns. The mayor as well, Mayor Maddie Parker of Fort Worth, sharing her concerns and saying that Keller ISD should continue to be its own. It's also important to know that Keller ISD has been in the news for banning books, for suppressing when racist comments or situations happen in their district.
I think they canceled a DEI initiative.
Yeah, that's that too. So Keller has been one of the classic Texas, kind of South Lakes that has been challenged and continues to kind of disappoint.
Well, it's funny because this first came to my attention from a tweet, I think it was, which I will continue to call it Twitter. And it was basically some folks that are very much in the know in Keller because they live there and they're part of Keller ISD. Their kids go there. And they were saying that they had heard that this was happening. And I thought, this cannot be real. Yeah. And they were saying that they hadn't found anything to back it up as being something that was real. Because apparently the school board, or at least some of the school board members, were contemplating doing this, but as one of the quotes from in the article states, that they were trying to keep it kind of quiet so as not to get the community riled up, which seems insane. But at first I was like, is this even possible? And the fact that if they were to contemplate doing this, that it's the county judge and the county commissioners that are in charge of putting in place like an interim school board for the newly created district, and then setting elections for a permanent filling of those positions. So, of course, the first thing we think of is, who is behind this, if this is something that the county judge and the county commissioners are going to be able to be making decisions about. And so there's 2 articles in the Star-Telegram. One article from the Fort Worth Report, splitting Keller ISD in 2, Fort Worth mayor opposes the idea and hasn't heard from the district. So that article had a lot of the information that EJ just shared with you about kind of how this came, who the players are that have been speaking up about it. And then the Fort Worth Star-Telegram had an article called Rumor is True, 2 Keller school board members blindsided by the plan to split the district. So apparently 2 members weren't even aware that this conversation was happening or that it was being carried forward further. And there was some speculation that it was going to be on the agenda for their next meeting in this month. And that they were going to discuss it in executive session. So then there's a whole conversation about what is allowed to be considered an executive session. And it's pretty clear that you're only supposed to talk about getting advice from your attorney in executive session. You're not supposed to be sitting there talking about the pros and cons of an issue. It's just getting legal advice. So the fact that so normally you would have to bring up the issue in a regular meeting and then explain why you were going into executive session to discuss the fact that you need to get some legal advice from your attorney, and then come back out into the public meeting where you continue to discuss the initiative or the idea as a whole, and that you have to have a public portion of that meeting where the public gets to chime in. So it seemed a little shady how this all came about. And then the third thing that came up for me was, Harrison Mantis did a article talking about a parody where Alliance ISD, which is what they are supposedly proposing that the new district would be called, somebody has put together a Facebook page, and I am telling you, it is hilarious. So it's a parody Facebook page apparently, but they shared Harrison's article on there and said, nobody reached out to us to ask us any questions before deeming us a parody. You're welcome for the clicks. That was their final comment on that. But this Facebook page pokes fun at the proposed Keller ISD split. But one thing that came to my mind as I was reading all of these articles was, if it's the county commissioners that decide who interim people will be in a new ISD, the one person that I don't see quoted in any of these articles is the new commissioner that I think would be over this area, and that is Matt Krause. So Commissioner Fickus didn't run this last election cycle, and so he's no longer in office, and Matt Krause is the new county commissioner for this area, and nowhere in any of these articles is he referenced or quoted. So the mayor of Fort Worth has chimed in on it. The mayor of Keller has actually chimed in on it as well, and their comments are very neutral, basically indicating that they are supportive of whatever would be in the best interest of educating children. So that's good, but I don't know if they and none of these councils would have any say anyway, because it's the independent school district. Yeah. So the fact that the county has some say in the beginning if a new district is created, and then it would go on to be an independent school district, just like all the multitude of other independent school districts that exist in the region.
Yep. What I find is that there's nothing of these articles really talking about why they want to do this. Like, that seems pretty hush-hush right now.
Yeah, I think some of the comments have implied that there is a right and wrong side of the tracks situation, and that this is kind of trying to break off a portion of Keller that is considered the wrong side of the tracks. But I don't think any of these articles say that. It's just mainly kind of been comments.
Because they haven't really been able to, so the traditional, I guess, least socioeconomic, more diverse, more needed of support Keller, and
and I think there's some Fort Worth residents that go to Keller schools. And so it may be, and I haven't looked at the line, so it may be, since Charles Larsdorf is chiming in on this, and he represents a portion of these people. It may be the Fort Worth side of the district currently that go to Keller ISD schools that would then be in this new district. But again, I haven't gone and looked at maps and seen exactly where this would be. And I'm not as familiar with the makeup and breakdown of, where folks live in Keller.
Yeah, and that's where another thing I think I would love that you and I start maybe having it is I'd be interested in starting to have a third co-host of some capacity that comes in and out that's from outer loop Fort Worth. I think it's really hard for us to run a podcast anymore and have only the lens of the people who live in the loop.
I think you're right.
So I think it'd be really nice if anyone has any recommendations or thoughts of people we can start just kind of giving us real insight of the culture of Keller, culture of Alliance, and might also be a good fit for the 817 pod. I think that's limiting us and our ability to fully educate you guys on this. The thing about the Alliance ISD parody, it feels to that they really would want that. I don't know, they had the whole making of a stadium and the campus, and it actually is I don't know. I just
they're
feel
very inclusive in their language. If you look at their website, they're when people ask in the comments, "I live here. Would I be able to come to this school?" And they're like, "We accept everyone."
But it's but it'd just be really interesting to know if is that Alliance ISD thing strategic? There's so much in the back end of this that it's just very difficult to really understand what it's going to go to. But I imagine for our next pod, we'll have a lot more context because their meeting is January 16th. And so there'll be more. And I mean, Star Telegram and Fort Worth Report are staying on top of this and have had multiple stories as when anything drops about this situation.
Yeah, and I think some of that wrong side of the tracks language I was referring to did come from the parody Facebook page. It's quote unquote where your kids go when Keller ISD decides you're on the wrong side of the tracks. The Alliance Independent School District Facebook page intro reads.
Yeah, because right, we're looking at the cities that Keller students come from. You're coming from Fort Worth, you're coming from Colleyville, you're coming from Haltom City, Hearst, North Richlands Hills, South Lake, Watauga, and Westlake. I mean, you talk about an array of different demographics and stories. I mean, which to me should excite Keller. I'm actually blown away that it comes from that many diverse places to have the lack of diversity on their school board, one, and then two, just the moral challenges that they have on stewarding welcoming environments and safety for all.
Yeah, 27 out of 42 of the schools are in Fort Worth.
Yeah. And so I'm just fascinated on understanding the culture there, because it is something that is always on my back pocket when I talk about progress is economic connectedness. And that is meaning that kids do better when they're associated with people from different socioeconomic classes. They're making friends. They're connecting and building their own social networks by connecting with people from all walks of economic differences. If you just do school boards based off of income and all the kids from the same neighborhood go to the same school together, that diminishes the progress and cultural nuances that kids need when they're not interacting with people from other traditions, cultures, housing status, backgrounds. Those are the things that I felt like were very powerful for me as someone who grew up in rural Texas where all kids went to the same school. You would stay the night at the more affluent kid's house. The kid from the affluent house would be allowed to stay a night at the other kid's house. Then I'm staying out a night of friends who lives in an apartment complex next to a McDonald's. All these things were very big to me in my ability to be able to talk to all people and understand that there's beauty in all walks of life.
And that also harkens back to how we make decisions about where these lines are drawn. And when we redistrict these things, where lines are drawn, because people get used to things being a certain way and their kids going to a certain school, and then we redraw lines. And so do we redraw those lines based on, educational outcomes, what's in the best interest of kids, and then, or the emotions and passions of folks who, it's been this way, my kids went to this school and now there's going to be another school. I think all of that input needs to be spoken about in meetings where transparency is there. But I think when you come down to the decision in the end, it needs to be based on what's in the best interest of outcomes for students to be successful. And to your point, not having segregated areas and having kids not be able to be around kids that are not like them.
So our third story is going to go to the state. The 89th Texas legislator will be in, office doing what they're supposed to be doing by the time we have our next episode.
So we drop our episode on Monday, and Tuesday, the state legislature is returning. The leadership is battles and divisive issues await all of the lawmakers. The 140-day regular session comes on the heels of a combative election cycle where there was a lot of primarying of incumbents and different outcomes. But now a staunchly conservative Texas legislature is poised to approve the agendas set by the Republican state leaders and will convene on Tuesday for its 89th session to tackle issues that touch the lives of 30 million Texans. For those of you who don't know, our legislature meets every 2 years for 140 days, and it winds up their work in early June unless they elect to have some special sessions to hash out things that they don't get done in the regular session. Most of the heavy lifting by the 150 state representatives and 31 state senators in the Republican-dominated state House will be in the trenches of policy as lawmakers sift through thousands of proposals, and I mean thousands. Like literally, when I started paying attention to what goes on in Austin, I was flabbergasted at the number of bills that are filed and then have to go to calendars and to committees and then finally make it to both sides. And they don't all make it. So there is a lot of gnashing of teeth and discussions going on I would have to go look at the numbers to see what actually kind of makes it to a committee and makes it to discussion of both the Senate and the House.
But it also is fascinating why this, like the Speaker of the House is so important, is because they get to kind of decide the ones that we're going to like really get done.
Yeah, they do have a lot of power over kind of what policies go to calendars and then also the appointments to the various committees. And there's been all kinds of discussion about how there's some staunch Republicans who don't believe that Democrats should be able to be chairs of any committees, that if you're in the majority, you should just lock everybody out that's on the other side and not let them have any positions of power, which, you know, from what I've said in the past, I think that's the wrong way to govern, but that's their prerogative, I guess. But the Senate will be run under the leadership of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who is expected a relatively run-of-the-mill open. In the House side, the first thing that they're going to have to do is select a new speaker, and that has been a controversial thing because there's 2 Republicans that are vying for that seat.
And that is
Representative Dustin Burrows and Representative David Cook.
Which is based out in Mansfield. So
David Cook is the former mayor of Mansfield, and I think he received the vote of the Republican caucus to be their candidate. But Dustin Burrows is also a Republican, and I don't think in all the articles I've read, neither one of them has the number that they need.
Which is like 76
70 something.
Yeah, and that is so like one of I think another maybe possible, you know, co-hosts, or if someone like a Bud or somebody can join us on a regular basis to talk state politics, because the real drama in Texas politics is between the Republicans. So a lot of what we're talking about from like a progressive worldview is really out of the box drama, but there is a lot of drama in-house, and a great pod to follow and listen to is the Texas Take, which focuses on state politics. Me and Ann listened to this week's episode as well before getting on the pod, but basically the short version is that this comes down to power, who gets to make the decision, and there's so much drama and infighting between them because a lot of these Republicans are able to get on the news if they're willing to mess more about Dan Patrick's Republicans or the Dade Phelan Republicans, whatever one, pick your poison, than if you were going to bash the Democrats. So the Democrats are kind of also infighting among each other, which is always an issue with Democrats in Texas that we don't have the time or energy or resources it should be doing. So that infighting is taking things as simple as everyone agrees teachers should get paid more, and that takes 14 months rather than 4 months. And so there's just a lot of drama there. So the Rep David Cook represents the Dan Patrick part of the Republicanism, I guess. And I guess Rep Dustin Burrows is more the Dade Phelan branch. So there's this infighting that's fascinating. I bet you can find some Republican media podcasts that really gets you inside that stew.
Yeah, the one paragraph in this article in the Dallas Morning News that is funny to me, because when I witnessed from the gallery kind of how things operate down in Austin for the first time, I was surprised. It says, then it's on to the day-to-day work of the next 5 months, forming committees, digging through proposals, listening to witnesses, horse trading, deal making, and passing or killing legislation. And literally, as things are being discussed on the floor, you'll see groups of people go over and have a little conversation over here. And then other people go in and talking to other people at their desks and pulling other people in. And this is all out there. You can see it happening, but you can't hear it because these people are not on microphones. They're just over here having a conversation. And so that's what I think of as like the horse trading and all that. And from my perspective of being in public office, it was like you couldn't go have those kind of conversations off to the side with just a few people, because that was like a walking quorum if you had more than a certain number of people. And I guess these are small enough groups that you're not breaking open meetings requirements, but it just seems untoward to me.
Yeah. And we have several topics that need to be discussed, from what is going to happen with public education. Does Governor Abbott have his votes? What is that going to look like?
Higher education,
yep.
The DEI stuff.
Yep. And then you have hemp-derived THC, selling of marijuana, property taxes, of course, water availability, healthcare, gambling expansion, power grid, immigration, and abortion and access to women's rights to healthcare. So there's just an array of things that really need to be done.
But all they really have to do is pass a budget. Like all that other stuff is not required of them. All they have to do is pass a budget. Now, budgets attached to things are moral documents that if you're funding a certain thing, then these other things come into play.
And a lot of the conversations on that budget, because forget, we also have a 30+ billion surplus of tax dollars. So we live in a state that is probably weirdly more armed to make moves in power than most countries. And we're sitting on this for what? I do not know, but I do see that there's a lot of requests for salary bumps. There's the police department looking for 15% increase in salaries. You're having other people looking to add positions, like in the juvenile facilities, and also transportation. There's people requesting more positions, so we'll also see how that goes when it comes to just running a city. All right, so there we have it. We have given you your 3 short stories for this week. Now we're going to move into the big story, and that is with an interview conversation with Tara Maldonado. If any of these stories we talked about, you fire you up and passionately want to do something about it, you hear from someone who shares a story of how that's how they got in office as an activist, an ER nurse, a mother, a Latina. She ran for office 3 times, one in District 4 of Fort Worth and twice in District 4, and then is also in District 11. Tara Maldonado is one of my favorite local politicians just because I feel similarities in who she is as a person and how we approach. I think the greatest asset today in humanity is authenticity and willing to sacrifice for authenticity and willing to be yourself and whatever the outside world wants to depict you or say about you. And so she's someone who I also think gives a great, honest view for an average listener who comes from no money, no network, no access. You might have just moved here. You're listening to this pod and you're getting excited to think about more you want to do. Tara Maldonado is a great person to discuss. They're also going to have an event for people interested in becoming a part or of wanting to run for office. She and the Catalyst Project are going to have a workshop January 29th that is going to also be available to people who are interested. So we're having her talk and I think has a great dialogue with Ann about the process and the perspective of running. You have two women who ran for office, from mayor all the way to district seats. So here is Tara Maldonado. All right, beautiful people, we have, for the fourth time, Tara Maldonado. She was first on here running for District 4. Then she came on running for District 11 with the rezoning. And then we had the great District 11 panel discussion amongst all District 11. And now she's here again to talk about what it's like to run. And if you're considering to run, what you need to know if you're going to do so in local office. Tara, it's been a long time, but how goes it?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me back on.
Yeah, we were saying you might have the record now with the fourth visit to the pod.
That's very humbling. Thank you. It's kind of cool to see the evolution of the podcast. You know, when y'all started this, we were in COVID. We were like 2020, right?
Yep.
Right. And so it was just Zoom calls. And I actually think my first few interviews, I was driving and with an earbud in.
Oh, that makes me very
I'm sorry, Ed. I'm sorry. I'm never really still, and at that time I was so busy, and so forgive me. I don't do that anymore, but that's just a memory that I recall. So now being in a studio with you, EJ, is pretty cool. So yeah, congrats on the evolution.
Yeah, and I love to see that you came to the last 817 gather, which is always cool to have your thoughts and perspectives and allow other people who are just here to talk about the city to also just get someone who has expertise. And so I know you don't see his expertise, but the reason why I would say I'm on the Tara Maldonado fan club is because you're someone where I resonate with, right? I like to say something that we're similar in. You're 100% authentic. You're a brawler. You're not afraid. And I think, and then you're also just like someone who comes from normal background. You're a nurse. You're a provider for your family. You have all the things to do while still considering to run for office. And so to me, when I think about the average Fort Worthian going out to do so, I hope they can hear your story or see what you were able to do early, and think about what to do from there. I think there was obviously a lot of challenges that we can always talk about, things that, looking back, maybe if we would have considered them this way. But I just want to take your thoughts here. If someone came up to you and says, hey, I'm thinking about running, what are the things that you would like them to know that you wish you would have known? And please share any kind of stories or more experience for maybe new listeners who don't recall your runs, about what it was like.
I think the first thing I would really ask them is like, why? Why do you want to? And pretty much in like the first 30 seconds to a minute of them answering that question, I don't want to be too bold, but I could probably tell right away whether they'll be successful or not. I think that a strong why is important, and I feel like a lot of what I've seen is a lot of candidates don't really put a whole lot of thought in what it actually means to do that job, right? Like what I learned early on when I first decided to run is there was a lot of emotion behind it, but then when I slowed it down and really looked at, okay, I think because of my background and being a nurse and being somebody who is already in a role that serves others, and really kind of in a job that is almost never about myself. My patients never ask me if I ate or if my feet hurt, or nothing about my job is personal. So I think that once I thought about what does it mean to be on city council, and I would watch someone like Ann, or I would watch, at that time, Brian Bird, or there was all these different personalities. And so I kind of really deep dive into what do I need? What would I need to be able to be the city council person I wished was my representative? And I think that's the biggest part is if you're wanting to run in whatever position, do you actually have the ability to serve in that position? And which is kind of sometimes when you really weigh it out is a little bit unfair to people, to single moms who have kids who can't give 40 to 60 hours of their week for almost basically free. to a role that really should be fulfilled or filled by someone like that, because they have a perspective that council really needs. But they can't, and that's just kind of like, it's kind of about being realistic about what you can really do in that position. Do you have the capacity to, and kind of putting all in, because the truth of the matter is like, as much as your like voters love you, this, as soon as you don't do what they want, or as soon as you diverge from what they believe you to be or think you should be or whatever, they're going to have a problem. And so you're going to have to reconcile the difference between you needing to do your job and people like liking you or giving you commendation. And in that kind of role, it's going to be sometimes hard or almost rare to get both, at the same time. And so I think those are the kinds of things that people really need to consider when they're running. And again, I had 3 tries at it, and each time there was always an evolution. And where I started out on like this kind of, I'm gonna run because like I want to make a change. It was like, okay, like I want to run. Yes, I want to make change, but I also understand that there's so much more to this than I ever could have imagined. And I feel like people aren't being told that they have this idea, and it's not the reality. And I think that we would do a much better service for regular folks who want to run for office to really kind of tell them the ins and outs of, these are the considerations. This is probably what you need to work on, or this is where you need to get yourself. What are the personal things that you need to align yourself with so that you can like fully like carry out that role and be effective? Because what's the point in getting in that position as a regular person and expending all that energy to not be effective and not be able to actually carry out the thing that you wanted to do, from the beginning?
I thought I was going to have all kinds of things to add, and I think that's totally spot on. Like, I think you don't know, and people often get caught up in some kind of emotional one topic issue, and that's what sparks them to run. And then if they do win, they get into that seat and they have no idea what the whole job is. I know that in the beginning, when I very first was considering running, I was told that my children, being the ages that they were, which was 12 and 16, that they were borderline too young for me to be able to do this job. And that was in 2014. And so that not telling people what the job entails, or telling them in a way that is like discouraging them from doing it, is those gatekeepy kind of things that keep it only people of a certain ilk. And I think you and I both have aspects of us that were not part of that ilk. Being a mom and having kids to take care of, nobody would ever ask a man if he had small children,
right?
Or tell a man that had young children that he shouldn't run for office because of child rearing responsibilities.
So let me make sure, between the two of you, now that I think about this, so you ran, I guess, for District 9 how many times? Because you won your time, and then you had to hold it how many times? You were there for 7 years?
Yeah, I was there for 7 years, but we had a special election in 2014. That wasn't a regular election cycle. So the previous council member stepped down in the middle of a term. So I ran in 2014, special election, 2015 in a regular election, but unopposed. So there were 6 of us in the original race in 2014, and none of them ran again in 2015. And nobody else filed to run either, which I like to say is because I was doing such a fabulous job. So 2015, then 2017, I had an opponent and ran and won. In 2019, I ran without an opponent. And then in 21, I ran for mayor.
Gotcha. And then you said 3 times. So you did District 4, District 11.
So District 4 in 21 against Carrie Moon.
Gotcha.
District 4 in the special election in 22 against Alan Blaylock.
Got it. And
then the District 11 race in 23, which I technically wasn't supposed to be running for, but yes, I ended up running. Yeah.
So take me to, I guess, once the why. What's a strong why to run? Like, what do you see? What are you looking to hear from a strong why?
I can say that for my why, it was, I think the thing that people really don't understand when they're like, oh, we need change, or oh, we need this, and we need somebody. There's always this kind of like unknown somebody out there that's supposed to do this thing or this change. And when I was contemplating, when the idea even came up, I was like, yeah, yeah, sure. And then like, everybody's looking around at each other and they're like, somebody's not there. And then that's kind of when like this little voice was just like, hey, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, wait, not me. And so I methodically was like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. And so what happened is I actually started looking up the council members at the time, like what they did for a living and kind of stuff like that. And I gotta say, like, respectfully, I just really wasn't that impressed. And so I was like, oh, like that's all they do? Like, I'm an ER nurse. Like, do you know like what I have to do on like a 12-hour shift? Like that you probably don't do an entire year. And so I was like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And then I had to go, well, how much time does that job really need? I'm like, they have like executive session, they have the meeting, they have like, then you have like other, it's not, yeah, committees that you sit on. And then you get the agenda on Friday and you've got like till Monday to get through it. And that's if they don't add things on at the last minute, which is what I brought up when the last time I was at City Hall. And so I was like, well, do I have the time to do that? I'm like, well, yeah, technically. And I'm like, well, I can't quit my job. And so it was kind of like, I really kind of went through, was trying to find all these reasons why I couldn't run. And I couldn't find any other than I wasn't willing to do it. And I'm like, well, I am. And so then it was like, then do it,
I don't think most people do that much research. I mean, I've watched several people come on to council and just be completely flabbergasted with everything that they need to do. So the fact that you researched, figured out even just the logistics of the number of meetings and the number of committees and when packets are dispersed and how much time you have to actually read your packet. When I served on the zoning commission, I was told by the previous person who served in that seat that I might walk into a zoning commission meeting and hear people ripping open their packets at the actual meeting. And so that would bother me. I don't think you should be able to be on a board or commission if you're not preparing ahead of time, but I think that might happen hopefully it doesn't happen on council, but I mean, that's the most prepared I've ever heard anybody.
Well, I mean, not only that. So of course, when I had contemplated it, the murder of Tatiana Jefferson had just happened, and that's really kind of what spurred it. And before that, I'd been in the activism space, anyway. And so then the city budget had been come up. So then I got my hands on the city budget and I went through that sucker line by line. I went through it line by line and I was like, okay, I don't understand this. I'm gonna go look this up. The wells and the gas and all those budgets. And then I went through the CCPD budget and I'm like, wait, like there's stuff over here that should be in the general budget. I even called in a CCP. And so I don't have any diagnoses. Like, I don't know. I just really like understanding how things work. And if I'm going to go do something, I like to be good at it or at least competent. And so like, that's the thing too. It's like, I'll be serving this position. I see how I come down and talk to city council. Somebody's going to come and do the same thing to me. Right. Like, and they should. And so I better be ready. Like, I want to be ready to go on day one. And I just rabbit holed everything about city council. I reached out, I made friends in other municipalities with city council members. And again, in the subsequent runs, they were given they had strategies on how to go through the packet that they get on Friday for the meeting on Tuesday. Like, this is how I break it down. This is how we process last minute items. This is how you're going to call this is how you ask for continuance or make your motions in that specific way. And then it even got down to once you're on council, let's figure out your personalities of your council members and see how you're going to be able to negotiate with them. And because of course everybody saw me coming in hot, as I'll say, and I'm really actually not. I just again, like I said, I come in really well informed, and so that puts people off. They're not expecting that, and so they're kind of somewhat threatened by it. And I don't mean it that way at all, but it's just kind of if I knew I was going to get counsel, I was going to be coming in hot. I was going to have the reputation that I had, but I knew that it was important that I would be able to reach consensus with people, and that if I was going to have longevity on council, that I would need to do that too. So I was always working on okay, how do I approach this person who I think thinks X, Y, and Z of me, which isn't really true once they get to know me. But if I have all those strategies like in my tool belt ready to go, I'll be able to try to like use them. And so again, I think all of these things. Again, I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I'm not sure.
No, I
or
think
maybe
there's
that
something completely right with you.
And so like I think that these are things that I want people to hear, and I want them to consider when they're going to do this, because the thing is like, what the other thing that people don't talk about is what happens when you finally win and you're in this new space and you're basically the new kid on the block. You've got to figure out who you can make an ally, who do you not want to like create tension with, like, and you're basically kind of at the mercy of those who have been serving longer than you, and you just kind of navigate that. And so think about coming into that new space and you're having that's all personal stuff. Again, the voters, the district doesn't care about that. And I don't want to say they don't care. That's just not a consideration for them. In their life, they know what they want. They know that they want this car moved on the street, or they don't want something torn down, or they don't want this. And on day one, they expect for you to perform. And if you don't perform, then you're going to already have like blowback. And so then you're
from people who supported you.
Right. Well, that's a whole other, but I'm just talking about in general, like, you know, the expectation is that you are the city council person. You should know what you're doing, even though like, no, there is no like training for this. There's no real training. And so I think that also, so somebody who is new in that space, navigating all of these new relationships, and mind you, even more important relationships are the ones with like the city staffers, like the ones that like you actually need stuff from, that you need reports from, and you think you're going to come in there and you're going to change this and that, the other. They've been there for 20 years. They've gone through 5 city council persons. You're not doing anything without them having buy-in for what you want. Your approach means everything. So there's all this stuff that needs to be considered. And so the other part is too that even your own supporters, as you just said, and they also don't understand that. And so when you're not doing what they think you should do, then you'll also lose their support somewhat. And that can be like a really lonely place to be. And people need to also be prepared for that when they get in there. And again, also, I don't think that I have ever heard anyone talk about it. And that's kind of how we are here today, because I told EJ, I was like, I think I really would like for more regular people to be able to run more competitive campaigns, because unless they're set up by essentially one part of the establishment or the other, I really haven't seen competitive city council races from just individuals who got up one day and said, hey, I want to run. Yeah. And I think it's possible, but again, I feel like if people were better prepared or could count more things in mind, keep more things in mind, that it would only be a service to our city and a service to their district and a service to the neighborhood and to themselves. That there's so much learning to do there that, I mean, I could tell you, like, I'm definitely not the same person that I was when I decided to run the first time at all. Like, not even close. We're talking about, I don't even know who that person is anymore. So it's just, I think, important that all of these considerations are talked about openly, and they don't need to be secrets. I don't know why this information hasn't been more openly shared. And maybe it's just that people didn't really think about they needed to share it. But since I had the experience and things like that, I would like for everyone out there to hear that.
I feel like Ann took the traditional route to get there, right? Home association, zoning committee, council. You're like, I'm an ER nurse with a poster fighting for a Tatiana Jefferson. I'm gonna show up. I would love to hear the challenge with the activism community in Fort Worth, and just like the nuance of, because you can also know that, like, we know that Fort Worth has this like, oh, if you come from this activism community, it's an automatic shutdown. Like, we don't even, the option of you even to be able to even get elected is really low. I mean, that's why I think even though you didn't ever win, you got hyper close for somebody who I would say was in the activism segment of Fort Worthians decided to run. So what's your kind of take there? And then I would also, if Ann wants to jump in on that one, you can too.
Well, my activism didn't start in Fort Worth. My activism was going on in Dallas for a few years before I ever even was in Fort Worth. So my biggest jump in activism happened. I was still living home in Waco, and unfortunately the Dallas police shooting happened. They were having like a parade, or I think it was in like 2015. I don't quote me on that date.
Yeah. But we remember
the ambush,
The shooting downtown.
the ambush,
Yeah.
right? And Mark Hughes, who I actually do know now, was ABC News was running coverage of the shooting. I was watching from home in Waco, and I had really started getting involved in like understanding like the power of like the economy and the dollar and that kind of thing. And so he became prime suspect number one. And they're like, we're looking for a black man with like semi-automatic gun around his shoulder or whatever. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, hold on. Who is in the newsroom at ABC? Like, there's no black man on the planet that's going to shoot 7 cops and just keep strolling around the street with that same semi on his shoulder. It's not happening. Like, what are y'all talking about? Like, and so like they show Mark on TV, and then like he's like surrounded, and he's like, yo, like, right. And he's like, it's registered, it's this and that. And, at that time, open carry wasn't a thing, but if you were licensed, you could carry. And he was exercising his right, but they were like zoned in on him, and of course he obviously was not the person that did it. And it really rubbed me the wrong way in so many ways. Like, again, not to like traverse off this subject, but my biggest issue with 2A rights in Texas, especially, and just even in this country, is like, oh, we want our 2A rights, but 2A right people don't come out and defend black men when they're like exercising their right for 2A. They're eerily quiet, and it even like right now it infuriates me. And so that was really like, oh, I'm going up there. Like, I like was like, yo, I was looking up everything I can. I'm going to Dallas. I'm going, like, I'm supporting him, this, that, and the other. And then it went from there. Next Generation Action Network was also doing their thing, Dominique over there. And then Puerto Rico happened, and Corey, Mark's brother, and Lee Merritt did like a Puerto Rico relief fund. They were like chartering their own trucks, chartered their own plane to fly supplies down there. So I just was kind of got plugged in, and so was going there. The Botham Jean March after he was shot by the Dallas police officer, mistaken apartment, went up was marching there too, was doing all that with them. And then I had taken a contract in Weatherford in the ER there, and that's how I ended up moving up here. And I picked where I wanted to live because Fort Worth, the small town feel, like, doesn't feel like busy Dallas, like, I really like it here, and that's what got me here. So all that energy, I didn't come from the Fort Worth activism space. So I think maybe me being unknown, like I wasn't. I just showed up one day and was like, hey, I'm here. Like, so it was like I had already. How
long were you in Fort Worth until you decided to run?
I had lived there 2 years.
I love that.
Yeah.
I need more 2-year people to go run for office. If you've only been here for 2 years in Fort Worth, consider running.
Yeah, I
That's part of the thing, though, because even after 35 years of being here, people still ask those questions. Are you from here?
Right.
Yeah,
And that's a thing. That is a thing.
Yeah, I moved here and like just put my head down and work. I had gone through a messy divorce, so I was just kind of like trying to get myself back together. And well, that's not true. It'd probably been a few years, but I moved here, put my head down, was just working and getting myself right. And when the shooting happened with Tatiana Jefferson, I was like, hold up. Like, was driving all the way to Dallas from Waco. And if I don't get out and do something about this, and I live here, something's wrong. Like, and so that's how I ended up down at City Hall. And when they locked us out and they said the dais was full and the live stream started and it was half empty, I was lit. I was ready to go.
They let a lot of Mercy Culture in.
Yeah.
I
wasn't even
that was
Mercy
before.
Culture. No, that was
before
Mercy
that.
Culture wasn't.
No, but I'm saying this last one, it was
The whole
full up
place
in there.
was
The
full.
whole
Yeah,
building
They've
was
gotten
full
much
inside.
better at accommodating crowds.
What I'm saying, the crowd now,
Yeah.
it was a lot
No,
more
Before they were just
open.
like overwhelmed by crowds,
Yeah.
and they would like stop and then.
Yeah, that's what really like. I was like, "Excuse me, why can't we get in this building?"
Yeah.
That's really like kind of what got me like, well, who are these people? Like, what's going on? Yeah. So yeah.
So so 2 years, you came from an activism kind of background, then you get seen with, you see the establishment of Fort Worth at this time. I imagine you kept you were working for 2 years, you decided to run, and now you were faced with, I guess, establishment energy. And I think something I think the word establishment is a word that it's like this boogeyman thing in Fort Worth that everyone kind of says if you feel like you're left out.
I do think it's a boogeyman because we've got the core establishment, and then we got those who are a part of the establishment but pretend they're not. So I do think so. Yeah.
And so what I would like to know is your first. Would you also connect Fort Worth Way as talking about the establishment, or are those two different things to you?
I don't.
What's your take, Ann, on that one?
I don't. Go ahead, Ann.
I mean, it's interesting because like your comment about those that are part of the establishment but think that they're not or say that they're not, because I might be on a line there that I'm not quite sure about, because I think there's parts of establishment that I've been accepted by, but then there's other parts that I definitely haven't been. And so you can, to your point about, do you go in hot and are unable to build relationships and come to consensus with people and convince them to the things that you want to accomplish? Or do you work with people? And if you work with people, is that, becoming complicit with the establishment, or is it doing your job, working with the people who are at the table with you?
I'm even more thrilled about this convo. I'm just getting better and better because I feel both of you are very opposite people who took very opposite paths.
It's funny because I don't feel opposite at all. I feel like we have a lot in common. But I think that being here as long as I was, I had a clear understanding of what I was dealing with. And there were things about the established way to run for office that rubbed me the wrong way, but I think I saw them a little differently. So it was more not so much specific things to Fort Worth, but the fact that when you run for office, you go get a list of people that vote regularly and you knock on those doors and you get enough people to support you that you can get elected. Whereas, and I always thought that was so awful because I wanted to talk to everyone and convince everyone and have everyone be engaged and involved. And people who are part of the established way of running for office would say that's not how it works. Like, you just have to reach out to the people who we know vote, because we don't have time for all that. So then you go back to, is there an established path, or is there a path that you follow that leads you to success? And that was kind of the way I followed it, but I wasn't planning it. Like, I just was involved in my neighborhood because that's what I do. I served on the zoning commission because my background is in city planning, and that was something I was passionate about. And then people started coming to me and saying, you should run for council because all these things that you've been doing kind of fall into you being an expert in those areas. But I don't necessarily, and I feel like I've kind of thought that that was the right way to do it. But hearing Tara's description, I feel like, no, there are a lot of ways to do it. And just because I followed that kind of more established path of serving on boards and commissions, being involved in my neighborhood, I don't think the council should be limited to people that do it that way, because that is just stacking the organization with people who look at the city and look at things and life from a very specific, a specific perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I love you, Ann, but I will disagree. I think we are very opposite. I do. But I don't think that I don't want people to misconstrue that as being something bad. I just think that the way that you describe getting to city council is like really the only acceptable way that the core people of establishment will get behind somebody. And I think that that's super toxic. Like, when you talk about the Fort Worth way versus like the establishment, I think when I think about the Fort Worth way, I think about the top tier people that have a lot of control in Fort Worth, who I feel like are actually kind of quite disconnected from the real establishment, which I consider to be the bottleneck of people who don't actually think that they're a part of the establishment, but that really are. And, I got to meet all those people in 23 when I ran for office, because I knew all of them. I had had conversations with all of them. And in 23, come to find out, people who I thought I at least had a good foundation with or had good rapport with or whatever wasn't the case at all, and actually thought something very different of me. And when I was approaching them with, what's the word, like a good energy, or like a authentic energy, like they were actually around me to really try to figure out, like, how do we pick her apart? What are things that I can, what are gripes, or what are things that I can pick at to make bigger than what they really were, so that then I can go,
Support a different candidate.
no, that
or-
I can go get other people to join me to make sure that that she doesn't, get there because of, I don't know, she's too loud, or like, why does she talk like that, or whatever their little gripes are. And I'm thinking, that's kind of crazy, because if you really knew me, you wouldn't say that at all. And then I'm thinking, like, are y'all really all like ganging up against an ER nurse? Like, what's wrong with y'all? Like, what kind of karma do y'all want in your life? Okay, gotcha. Wish you the best of luck the next time you're in the ER. No, don't let me find out, because I will call a few friends. Like, I'm just playing. But, like, I think that I know that a lot of people like to villainize, again, what I describe as a top tier Fort Worth way. And they're there. And for me, when I can like identify somebody, like if somebody was to be like, hey, listen, I don't like you, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z to like be in your way, and we're never gonna see eye to eye on this issue, and the X, that, and the other, I'd be like, okay,
Yeah, just being honest
Sure.
and upfront about what your agenda
Yeah,
is,
sure.
and not playing games.
yeah, no problem.
I
like,
ran into that constantly.
right, like I don't expect for everyone to believe what I believe, and I don't even believe that we should. I come from a very religious conservative background. I was raised in the anti everything. All the progressive beliefs that I have now, I was raised to be anti all those things.
Yeah.
And so I understand that perspective. And so I understand like the importance of someone having like the free will to make an informed decision. And if it's opposite of me, that's totally your right, and I respect it. The problem to me, I feel like the more nefarious part of Fort Worth is that bottleneck of people that is equally Democrats and Republicans that have this unwritten rule that in the off cycle, away from the primary years, it's all bets are off, and we can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want. You can't do whatever you want, but we can. And when you do whatever you want, how dare you? But when we do it, this is how we've always done it. And I think that that's a more bigger, broader problem as to why we actually don't get the progress that some of people's Facebook posts claim they want. They actually work against their progress in the off cycle. They're like yelling about it during the even years, and during the odd years, they're doing the stuff that they claim to be against during the off season, and they don't count it as being counterproductive, but they are. They're just creating this these rifts. And again, for somebody like me to have experienced that, like, I think also like the goal was to kind of make me like, I don't know, like demoralize me or something. And the opposite effect happened. But I think that to go after someone who just willingly wanted to serve their community is quite ugly, in my opinion. And you guys know, people aren't just lining up to run for council.
Yeah.
They're not lining up to be on boards. They're not lining up to volunteer for insert whatever in your community. It's hard to find people that want to give of their own time, of their own, even, whatever that is. And so for these people to claim, oh, they're this, that, and the other, and we need to have unity, for you to work that hard against, and I'm not the only one, it's happened to other people, for you to work that hard against someone that basically has that type of giving, willing, community-minded spirit is really quite ugly and nefarious. And I would honestly take what I know to be the Fort Worth way up top, because I know exactly what it is. Then I would take these bottleneckers, these gatekeepers, who I call shapeshifters, and I don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah. Now, so tell me, here's an example of what I think you're saying, that where I think you guys are similar races, your mayoral race and your District 11 race, in the sense of you guys weren't the established party's picks, right? Like very similar to Ann running for mayor and you running for 11.
Right.
I think that's a very similar example of now you guys are these
I would agree.
third tier candidate who's like, wait, why are you messing up the system? Why did you not go with the plan? And so giving you guys both kind of talk there is like how much, like, I feel like a lot of people who would be listening to this pod who maybe are passionate about the city but don't see themselves running because they weren't the chosen one from the path. You two are people who said, no, I feel called by my constituents or by my soul to do this still, regardless of what those parties think. I'm going to leave that out there for you guys, and whoever wants to touch it.
The similarity is that I felt like I had expertise in cities, and that was why I thought I would be a good candidate for that. And I think that, to Tara's point, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that the type of person that you think should be up there representing the community, being beyond, having lived experience and all that, beyond what just this lockstep establishment candidate might have, is similar. So I think that I do look at that not being the establishment candidate. I don't think I was necessarily the establishment candidate in my first race, even, because there was somebody with name recognition and backing of people from a side of town that typically have an over influence on candidates, but I beat that person.
Yeah, I think what I want to add too is I don't know how to put this. So like reflecting on the mayoral race when Ann ran is, I'm gonna be speaking more to my minority communities here, because this is, I feel like, a problem that we have, and I feel like, again, some of these gatekeeper bottleneck minority individuals that I feel are a part of the establishment but don't count themselves in, is they have put in work on boards, they have done kind of like the background stuff, they have basically done what was asked of them in this Fort Worth picture. And so whenever their number is called, or whenever they feel that it's their time, historically, minority communities and individuals have watched their white counterparts go through that same path and get the victory or get the position or get the spot. And so whenever these people who have put in this kind of, I call it, they've put in the work, they've put in the sacrifice of sweat equity, and they don't get they get somewhat of a path laid out for them, they want the same result. Like, I should get that spot or whatever. And I think I don't disagree with their line of thinking. It's just that, like, somehow or another it doesn't work out for us like that, and it's not fair. I have put a lot of thought into that, because I feel like that also played a part in the 23 race. Is, a third opponent who was basically told, hey, we want you to be in this seat, who had sacrificed, had given a lot of work to the city, had given a lot of energy, and it's somebody who I actually do respect for that, the stuff that they did, felt like, okay, it's my time. And then for somebody like me to be like, hold on, we don't have the same values, and you're also kind of moving ugly over here against the eventual winner initially. I'm not okay with that. And so it's kind of like this cognitive dissonance of experience is happening that, like, kind of makes me sad, because I know that those individuals have put in so much work and they've been promised X, Y, and Z. But as I've been saying, to whoever would listen to me, is like, to my Hispanic and my Black communities, and marginalized communities in Fort Worth, is, does it really make a difference if we get our candidates in, if they're just going to keep the cog and the wheel of the Fort Worth establishment going? And that's where the disconnect is for me, is that I know why they move and operate the way they do, because they've already done so much, but they're not getting the result that they see the quote unquote ands of the world getting, no offense, and no offense to any of the listeners. And so it comes this like clash at the end where it's like, I should have that, and I understand why they believe that, and in a perfect world that should be the end result, but that's not the world we live in. And so I think that's something that we need to find a way to reconcile, and I think that's how we make progress. But if I am the Latina that wants to rent that seat, I get in the seat and I just keep the wheel going, and I don't push for anything, and I don't make any changes, and I don't ask for progress. Then what difference does it make whether I was the first Latino on city council or not? If I'm not doing anything different, if I act and look like everything else does in Fort Worth, what difference does it really make? And so I think like that's the hard conversation. It's a hard thing to talk about. It's hard to say out loud, but I think that's like, if I'm going to say anything on the podcast, say probably the most honest thing I'll say. And I just think that, again, our like more traditional Fort Worth folk who aren't from those communities don't really have a hard time relating to. And those are things that we're having to reconcile in our own communities. And it's kind of what we're seeing the result of in these local elections, where we got, clashes within our own communities that are actually harming us more. And again, like I said, alluded to before, why would you go after, minority women who want to serve their city, and you want to cut them down simply because they won't follow your agenda because you believe that so-and-so should be in that position? And that's like one of the biggest problems that we have right now. And I'm trying to figure out like what part in that I can play that's positive. But at the end of the day though, like you said, I'm authentic and I speak my mind. Wrong is wrong no matter what party you belong to, no matter what gender you are, no matter how you identify. And I think that we got to stop believing that just because I'm Hispanic or I'm black or I'm a man or I'm a woman, that I can't harm, that I somehow am less harmful when I harm my own community. And it's actually, to me, in my opinion, the most harmful thing that you can do, because we're cutting down people who genuinely want to serve, are giving of their free time for positions that don't even really pay anything.
And that's the other thing.
That
People
demand
think,
a lot. Yeah.
People think that
Yeah.
the whole solution is to pay more. And I mean, I believe that they should pay more because I think that does open it up to a broader swath of folks that can actually serve. But I don't think that's the only thing that needs to happen in order to make that happen.
And again, I think that empowering people with just information, I think is a good place to start, so that the process of getting through trying to put a campaign together isn't like taking you out before you can even before you can even launch your campaign.
Yeah, I've had folks approach me and ask the question, like I'm considering running, and I go through a similar process that you talked to about what their why is, because often it's like one issue that they're passionate about. And if the reason is that they want to just get out there and have a platform to talk about that one issue, and they don't necessarily think that they're going to be successful in gaining the seat, I don't begrudge them that platform. But I have similar questions, not as in depth as you went into about it. But
well, let me clarify. Like I'll answer any question they want. I'm like, listen, anybody. Anybody who asks me, especially women. I'm like, you want to run for office? I'll give you the blueprint. But I'm telling you, that's not even close to what you need to actually be able to run a competitive campaign.
Yeah, you're not discouraging them from running. You're just making sure that they have full information, which I think is totally right. I was told every time I had somebody approach me to say that they were thinking about running against me, that I should never tell somebody not to run, even if they were announcing that they were running against me, because you don't tell people not to run.
I agree. I don't
totally
think that anybody has the right to tell somebody else that they shouldn't run.
Yeah.
I'm against that as well.
So let's hit like funding and like timing. Like to me, it's like time. We've heard all the time it takes, 40, 60 hours. It's another full-time job. Funding, right, I think is another one here. What's the, if you're someone sitting listening to this and you're like, man, I feel called to run, but the thing we haven't really talked about is money and the finance piece of this. What do you guys have to kind of say to that?
You got to raise a lot of money.
Yeah. Again.
And what's a lot of money? Like, in order to win a city council seat, what do you guys think?
It's gotten bigger since I was there, but
like I will give a quick rundown because I've kind of got this. So this is really towards the listeners of this pod, progressive minded folks. Basically, just right off the top, you have to raise enough money to negate all of the establishment money money groups and PACs that give money. So you need to be able to offset the $5,000 from the police union, the $5,000 from Fort Worth firefighters, the $5,000 from the safety PAC, and I would say go ahead and throw another $5,000 if the union or fire give a little bit more. And there's like another small one that would give money. And overall, like the number I came to was 20 grand. So like if you were gonna have a competitive race, especially against a incumbent, you better have enough money to offset that. You 20 grand in the hole, like you got like, you know, pennies against like that, it's going to be real hard. So I think that's one, you have to just immediately negate that money, because then that puts the score at like 0-0 when we come to funding. Now I'm talking like thinking football, right? Or like a scoreboard, like zero, we're neutral now. And then the other part of it is like, again, people might disagree with me, but like when you're running for office, people like need to believe in you, right? And so if you are not like, hey, charismatic, you're not doing something that's going to make them like you and give you their money, like, I don't know how you're going to fundraise. Like, you need to be like a charismatic candidate. Like, there was some candidates in this last cycle that ran for, they're at the county level, and I was like, why did you even bother running? Like, I'm, you know, and I know that sounds bad. I mean, anybody can run if you want to. Anybody can run for office, but I'm talking about being competitive. I'm like, what's the point of running if I'm not going to be competitive? It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of your time. Like, I don't have time for that. I could be doing anything else. And so I think that if you're a progressive and you want to run for office, you have to negate all that money right off the top. And so for me, again, unorthodox me, being being an ER trauma nurse, you know, I traveled to Chicago during COVID, and I didn't get one of those crazy, ridiculous New York contracts that paid me like 10 grand a week. It was like a standard travel contract with a little hazard pay, and no, I didn't have anything else to do. Everything was shut down. And so basically I had to keep my full-time job in Fort Worth, which was only three days a week, 3 shifts a week, for my, you know, insurance and stuff. And so basically what I did was, okay, I'm going to take majority of the money from my Chicago contract. And, I needed to do this. My daughter like turned 16. I had bought her like a little cash card, but I'm like, I'm going to dedicate a lot of this money to like be in the seed money for my campaign. 'Cause I got to be able to run. I need to like create a logo, and I got to do all this. And so again, I had researched like, what do I need? I need a logo. I need to like a good website. I got to get like a good staff. I need a campaign manager, like all these things. And so, and then the amount of time I would spend campaigning and not working, right? So like all my nurses out there, the way that we budget is like, okay, I want to go on this trip. Like, how many shifts extra do I need to work to like cover that? Or right. Or if I need to go, the kids need like, the sports stuff, whatever. And so I'd be like, I actually lost a lot of money and income running for office because I needed to be at meetings and interviews and things. And so offsetting the loss of that money per se. And so I took all that money from the Chicago contract that I worked from April to June of 2020 and put it towards the campaign. That's what I did. I went and just like, you got to get like kind of, I don't know, crazy. I don't know.
But so you're saying like $50,000 probably would be a surefire safe net.
The District 4 race in 21, I raised like $32,000 if I remember correctly. And that was all raised. That was organically raised. And thank you to all the supporters and everyone who donated. Like, I'm so eternally grateful. Like, I do want people to understand, like, I know that I'm like, say a lot of things that, could probably like really kind of offend people or turn them off or whatever, and think negative things. But my overarching experience for all of this has been extremely positive. Again, deep diving into learning Fort Worth and going through Leading Edge and doing Leadership ISD. Again, all those things I intentionally did because, like, hey, I genuinely care about this city and, like, I want to understand how y'all operate and why you do the things you do and the history and all that. Meeting all of those people, like, there are so many people that really, really care about the future of Fort Worth, which I think is great. And I don't know, like, how many other, like, municipalities have that. I don't know. I'm sure they do, but, like, it feels different here. I don't know. You talk about Fort Worth too. I hear y'all talk about Fort Worth on the pod, like in that kind of endearing way, and it is. And so, but yeah, like I would say 50. If I would say 50 grand, if you're progressive and you can win, you raise 50 grand, you're probably winning that race.
Wow.
I'm serious.
So
I don't know if you look at what incumbents have in the bank right now.
Well, no. Like, so, like, for instance,
you're not going to win.
Yeah,
open seat.
Yeah,
yeah,
I would
you're not
pull
gonna
up.
win.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. You know, we're not running in 3.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
we're not. I'm not. I wouldn't even run for mayor right now.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, you also have to be strategic and smart. Like, you know, and again, if you just want to run for the heck of, like, hey, they need an opponent, I want to give them one. Yeah. Hey, cool. Like, you can do that's cool. That's another way of looking at it too.
Well, it's also building name recognition,
right?
Because there's people who have run in races that were very, very, you know, not very possible that then ended up running in other races and were successful because they ran in a mayoral race.
And that, and if people out there are like, why does this person keep running for office? Well, it's because if people see your name enough on a ballot, you know, not everyone is that informed when they go to the ballot box. They see a familiar name and they pick it. Like, that's the truth. It's in the data.
Oh, and then the whole, like, drawing where you are on the ballot. All these things.
Yeah.
Like,
there's
first,
that too.
Yeah, it's wild. It's
wild.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time and, you know, being able to share with people about what it takes, what it looks like. So looking forward to that. Do you have any last minute things you want to say or any place we needed to direct people post this conversation?
Yeah. So again, I want to share this information, you know, my experience or any knowledge that I have. Like, you know, people can reach out to me directly, but actually I'm working on a project with the Catalyst project to give candidate training information, and not like a traditional training, like most traditional trainings are going to like, establishing your network and how to get your funding in place, and that can be something, but this is more of like preparing you as a person to run for office, which is super important, because there's a lot of things that, you know, you're gonna lose friends. People you thought would show up for you don't. You're gonna process, like, what does that mean? And it doesn't mean anything. They're not bad people. They're just busy, and people got things going on in their lives. And really being able to frame your mind properly to, like, prepare you to run, so that while you're in the midst of your campaign, you're not, like, completely losing yourself, which is super possible. Like, I realized I didn't even know that this was a thing. And real quick, not to go off topic, but my first campaign, some people who had volunteered to be on my campaign had worked on another, I think, a state rep race before mine. And basically, like, there's basically this, like, and you could chime in here, this understanding that a lot of female candidates are like bitchs. They're like, they don't treat their staff well, you know. And I was like taken aback by that. And then there was one big inflection point in that race where I really was quite ugly to somebody that, you know, I was having a bad day. I really just took it out on them, and I was rude to them on a meeting. And my campaign manager, there was like, what the heck is wrong with you? And I was like, whoa, like, this doesn't align with my values. I don't want to treat people like this, no matter how I feel. It's not okay with me. And so, like, I booked. So then I was like, all right, fine. I'm just going to get a therapist specifically for this. And I had, like, a session every 2 weeks so, like, I could vent and make sure that, like, I was being, like, when I showed up with my staff and people, that I was not taking out stuff on them that they didn't deserve. And even if they did, I still wouldn't, like, I needed to check myself and my ego. I was the engine that was running this show. And if I really was leading with my values, it meant that I treated people well. And I wasn't that witch candidate that they had, like, been working for. And so, like, stuff like that, just being mindfulness, and the way that, like, I believe that who I want to be as a candidate is the same person that is good to my neighbors, the same person that's good to my campaign staff, is good to whoever. Just no matter how bad I feel or what I'm going through, that has nothing to do with you. And so it's important that I exercise those values in my campaign. And so the training will be reflective of like, do you know yourself? Like, what are your triggers? And like, these are the things that you will have to face. Like, how do you deal with having to make a decision? You're on council and you have a zoning, like a zoning case, and it's going to keep the neighborhood this way, or it's going to change it, but it's beneficial in the long run. And you go against, like, how are you going to reconcile the vitriol that you're going to get from making a decision that you feel like is in the best interest of everyone, and maybe not what some, for certain few people wanted. These are the kinds of things that I think would be so much more beneficial to people in general, and also give them something to think about whenever they go to like rail against council now or, try to like go after people. Again, in the progressive space, I think we have a bad habit of like, if a progressive candidate doesn't do what we said, oh my gosh, they must be a sellout, or like they're just like, and I think that again, it's negative. Like, people are giving of their own time to try to be in these roles, and they're human too. And so you got to be considered from both sides of that lens, or that both sides of that argument.
Yeah.
And so that's what this training is going to be about, is really about preparing someone for that situation. Because again, there's no training for this. There's no schooling on this. There's no anything. And I think that even if they didn't run, but they kind of got that insight, that we would all be able to have better conversations, work on projects together, even if we don't necessarily get along, and get the progress that you guys talk about constantly on the pod that we want to get to here in Fort Worth. So that'll be coming up towards the end of the month. I think like a week after filing. So filing opens up on the 14th.
Which is why we did this at the time we did.
Yeah, and so you can be looking out for that from the Catalyst Project, and hopefully you sign up to come, and we can have a good conversation and have some in-depth, give you some in-depth frameworks on how to like navigate those feelings and those situations and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Cool.
I agree with all of that 100%. It probably took me 2 years to recover from my service of 7 years. And part of that was probably because I bottled up instead of seeking that support that is absolutely necessary. So doing that ahead of time and being prepared throughout, I think, is an incredible thing to offer the community.
Well, there you go, guys. A long conversation about all things running for office. So now we're going to move into wins and losses.
Yeah, that was great. It felt a little bit like a therapy session, but I absolutely enjoyed it. And the perspective that Tara has from her experience was eye-opening, and I enjoyed that conversation. So we always start with our losses so that we can end with a win. And my loss is an article actually that was put out by the city of Fort Worth entitled "Fort Worth Scores 79 out of 100 for LGBTQ Inclusiveness." The reason that this is a loss, you might think 97 is high and that's great and so close to 100, but the reason it's in my loss is because in the previous 8 consecutive years, Fort Worth has scored 100. However, this year, Fort Worth scored 97. Fort Worth scored 99 points in 2015, 83 points in 2014, 91 points in 2013, and 89 points in 2012. But our score this year, after 8 consecutive years of scoring 100, has dropped to 97. So this scoring is based on 5 broad categories. Non-discrimination laws, we got 30 out of 30. The municipality's employment practices, we got 20 out of 28 points plus 1 bonus point. The municipal services, 12 out of 12. Law enforcement, 22 out of 22. Leadership on LGBT equality, 5 out of 8 points plus 3 bonus points. And where we line up with other Texas cities, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, and Arlington all got the 100 points, whereas Houston got 83 and El Paso got 69. The full report is available, but I just think that this is a loss, and I can't necessarily point to specific things that have happened over the last year, but we've had several conversations about things that might have had something to do with this score going down.
Yes. Our city council got younger. We have become less welcome to diverse groups of people. Pretty interesting. My loss goes to Dallas city manager candidates start making their cases for why they should get the job. The city council will interview the candidates on Wednesday during a closed session meeting. However, the candidates were able to do a community meet and greet, which was super powerful and dynamic. You had the Fort Worth assistant manager, William Johnson, Sacramento assistant manager, Mario Lara, and Dallas interim city manager, Kimberly Beiser Tolbert. So the loss here isn't that Dallas is doing this. The loss is that Fort Worth did not. And you have someone just 35 minutes away, a city that is actually having interviews and allowing people to see the potential options for their city manager position. I'm going to go with my win so we can end with you closing us out. My win is two things that I just want to highlight. Number one, I found an alteration place that I absolutely love in the East Side. If you live on the East Side, there's a, what is it, an alterator? What do you call these people? Taylor. Cool. That is right near Black Coffee. Her name is Rosie. It's not right near, it's across the street next to the college. But she does outstanding work. She's done my last couple suits. And I just, I think just admire small business. She is Latina, but man, she's running a great shop. I mean, just for someone you can tell is like starting her own business, just how she has her car payments down, how she's doing her social media. She has her business papers. Like, it's all just like, you can just see she's trying her hardest to do something really right for people in a community. And so Rosie, I just want to recognize, and if anyone needs alterations done, you can see her address and link in the notes. The other person who is similar, and I will try to get her onto the pod, is we have the Fort Worth African American Roots Music Festival, which will be March 15th. I attended last time. I wish I would have been able to be more prepared to have Brandy Pace on, who's the founder. I wish we would have been able to have her on the pod beforehand, but I definitely recommend you guys to mark your calendar for March 15th for the Fort Worth African American Roots Music Festival, March 15th.
So not to go through an entire pod without talking about transportation, my win is...
We're so close.
I'll try, but
No,
good news keeps coming up,
yeah.
so I'm very happy
This is
to announce and share with folks that plans for a new Tex Rail station in Fort Worth neighborhood just got a huge boost. This article was actually sent to me by the author of the article. But then I got it from a whole bunch of other people, too, who all know that I'm excited about this. The U.S. Department of Transportation this week awarded Trinity Metro a $25 million grant to extend Tex Rail into Fort Worth's near South Side. This has been in the works and planned for years and years and years. I know it's frustrating sometimes how long it takes things to get done. But back in the day when we first started talking about Tex Rail, going into the medical district was part of the plan. But to get it to the airport, they had to focus on that portion of it first, and they got that done. They thankfully were able to finish under budget and on time, and then they convinced the federal government to allow us to keep the funding that we saved by being under budget to apply it to the extension to the medical district. But there was still a funding shortfall, and there still is some funding that is going to have to be raised by Trinity Metro in order to complete this. But the plans for this station literally were happening under the council member who served District 9 before I served District 9. So Joel Burns was instrumental in planning of location and design of this Tex Rail station. I continued to advocate and support it through my 7 years of service, and I know the current representative is doing so as well. And now we have this news that we are getting additional funding from the federal government to infuse into this new life into Trinity Metro's efforts to have more passenger rail service deeper into Fort Worth's urban core, allowing folks that work in the hospital district to arrive at work in various other ways besides individual cars, which is great.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that expansion as well, and congrats to everyone who was working on it. All right, beautiful people, we have come to the end of the pod. Again, thank you so much for being loyal listeners. We are going to have an 817 gather next week. So if you're interested in coming, you also have the registration to attend the 817 gather in the show notes. So we would love to see you, talk with you, learn about what you want to hear this upcoming year, and meet other listeners and just progressive people here in Fort Worth. You guys are great, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Dopamine swipe, follow us like double tap.